welcome. I'm bringing Brooklyn in the house. Come on in.
Okay, cameras are speeding.
I started this show in 2009 with Brooklyn Savvy set in different living rooms. So the best way to celebrate 20 seasons is to bring it home, literally. I wanted to create a safe space to have uncomfortable yet transformative conversations that move people, amplifying the voices of those who are underrepresented and who inspire positive change. I'm Toni Williams, and this is Brooklyn Savvy. Pregnancy and childbearing is a gift that many people don't have the same opportunities to access. On this episode, we'll unpack the complexities and myths that women face when it comes to getting pregnant with author Tanya Selvaratnam. Tanya, you know, this book, I've been talking about it since I've read it. You know, I've been talking about this whole issue around biological clock and advanced reproductive technology to anybody who would basically listen. But but I have 2 kids, thank God, because after this book, you know, I mean, there's a lot to be said about when to have a baby. So could you talk to us about what is the big lie?
Well, there are a couple of big lies. One big lie is that we can do things totally on our own timetables.
Now, see, that's a lie I never believed. But anyway.
I fell for it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I did too.
You fell for it.
Continue.
Yeah.
Well, I'll get through the other big lies. Another big lie is that when we're ready to have a child, if we can't do it naturally, then science will make it happen for us.
Okay, so why did you fall for it? I mean, why did both of you ladies fall for it? Because I'm a baby boomer, and I kind of knew that, you know, there was this thing called a biological clock because the messages were out there, and that you had, that the minute you turned 35, you went into high-risk pregnancy status. Mm-hmm. So what was it, what did you all hear?
For me, in my sex education classes, I was taught how to prevent pregnancies and STDs. I was never, ever talked to about the fertility span. I knew that somewhere in my 30s, my fertility would decrease, but I didn't know exactly at which point and by how much. And when people say your fertility decreases after age 35, what they really need to be telling you is it goes down by this amount by 37, this amount by 38, this amount by 39, because so many women, myself included, thought that as long as we did it sometime before we were 40, that it would work out.
Also, just I thought that there would be more time. It wasn't that, like that I didn't know that there was the biological clock. But then the other thing is, even in my family, there are women who have had children into their 40s. So there's that sense of then the myth gets reinforced in some ways, or that then it becomes, oh, there still is more time.
I also wonder if science isn't, as much as it isn't what it needs to be for the big lie not to exist, it's better than it was when we were younger because there wasn't that option. I mean, the test tube baby Louise Brown had just, you know.
And as a result, I think, you know, my mom clearly said to me, you know, those eggs aren't going to live forever. And then, you know, there was also about when to do this, you know, so what might delay me would have been, well, when is Mr. Right coming? Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
And now women can be a heck of a lot more proactive. So in a way, I'm glad that I was born back then, because I think I would have been really proactive, because that's just how I am. I like to take matters into my own hands and just, go, you know, so, and speaking about taking matters into your own hands, you talk about advanced reproductive technology. Share with us what some of those are.
An example is IVF, in vitro fertilization, where eggs are removed from the woman and fertilized outside of the body and then put back in, fertilized with sperm. So IVF was pioneered in the 70s. The first IVF baby was born in 1978 in England. And actually, while I was writing the book, the woman who had the first IVF baby actually passed away. So it was like this kind of amazing moment that I was commemorating
Was
her.
that Louise Brown?
Louise Brown's mother.
Louise Brown's mother.
Yeah.
That's part of the big lie, though, right? Too, that these treatments actually work and have a high success rate, but they don't. I remember reading, I think it was like 70-something% of the IVF treatments fail. Is that correct?
And even with
That's a big lie. Like people think I'll be okay.
30% chance of success.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I think, but you know, do you live your life by statistics? Meaning, do you live it by statistics?
I think with many of these reproductive technologies, they're not covered by insurance. They're considered elective. And when you have a situation where only 15 states in the country mandate some form of coverage for fertility treatments, then you do need the statistics so that people can make more informed decisions about how they're spending their money. Because it's a crime that in this country where you live and how much you make determines whether or not you can have a child through fertility treatment.
This is extremely expensive from
Extremely expensive.
You know, Alicia, share with us, and then we'll get back to what we were speaking about prior, but if you could talk to us about what the egg freezing, as another advanced reproductive technology that you covered in the book.
So I went to an egg freezing cocktail hour where it was hosted by an organization.
I was like, what are you drinking?
Champagne and Prosecco and little egg thing. No, I'm just kidding. But, deviled eggs.
Deviled eggs.
Actually, like ribs and all types of fancy and lovely things. But they had fertility specialists in the room, and the organization that hosted the event actually works as a liaison to the fertility world. So if you're thinking about freezing your eggs, you need like a patient care advocate. You don't need one, but they actually help you navigate all of the details involved in that process. It was a very interesting setting to have that conversation, because I think when I think of egg freezing, I think of a conversation being held maybe in a doctor's office or somewhere a little more
So where were you? At a fun venue?
at a hotel,
In a catering space.
in a cocktail space, and kind of an after hours happy hour thing.
And that is, do we think that's because it's a for-profit business?
It definitely is.
I certainly believe that. I will say there was I think, great information shared, but I think you really have to, as a potential patient, really think about how that fits your lifestyle.
No, there's this whole thing around freezing, and then what, you thaw the egg out kind of thing?
The first baby born from a frozen egg was in 1986, and the technology has vastly improved, especially over the last decade, but it's still a fairly new technology. And in 2012, one of the reasons these egg freezing companies are highly problematic is because they are basically making fraudulent claims. And I think it is time for the
egg scam?
It's an egg scramble. I think it is high time for the government to get involved and for
Is this the Wild Wild West? It's unregulated?
It is absolutely the wild, wild west. And the truth is that most women who freeze their eggs will either not use them, and who's going to be there to take care of the psychological and emotional problems that happen and so I really think that there needs to be some kind of governing body. I've been talking to various health professionals who are very concerned in particular about the tactics of egg banks. Serving alcohol while trying to get women to sign up for medical procedures is already ethically questionable, very ethically questionable. And there is no doubt that egg freezing has brought about some miraculous stories. Absolutely, that have.
Go ahead, I'm sorry. Continue.
But the truth is, there are far more heartbreaking stories, and those are the ones we're not hearing. Because there's a lot of money to be made. Global IVF revenue is $9 billion right now, and it's expected to rise to $21 billion by the year 2020. And in 2012, there was a report on fertility financing, $4 billion in fertility-related loans.
Whoa. Right, because you said it's not covered. Oh my goodness.
Because in most states, it is not covered by insurance. So,
Go ahead. I'm sorry. No, I have something I have to share here. I'll make it quick. I feel like I made the right decision. Okay, so just briefly, I actually am a matchmaker. So this is very relevant to what I do, and a dating coach, because I have a lot of clients coming to me that have ticking clocks, and the men are very aware that the women are 35 and their eggs are not as good. And
really?
Yes,
Good for
yes.
them, though, if
So
they
the
want
men
children.
know it's out there. But I had someone that came up to me that was a client, one of the top fertility experts in the world. I can't say his name, but he asked me when I was in my late 20s if he can freeze my eggs, like for free, in exchange for me being a spokesperson for his clinics.
That is so unethical.
Yes, so that's what we're getting at with the alcohol. I probably would be at the egg parties. Yeah, so I researched it and it scared me. And you know, it could happen for me. I'm only like 28 years old. So I started researching. I saw everything about the hormones that you have to inject, the process. It scared me. It seemed unnatural. And then the cost of the fact that, well, maybe I'm not ready to be a mom until I'm 35 or 36. Am I literally going to store my eggs and pay for all these years? And how's it going to work with this doctor? Is he going to pay in the clinic? So I feel like blessed that I didn't do it. But I hope it works out for me when I do want to have kids at the same time. So I hope I don't regret it.
The biological clock had a great impact on my childbearing decisions because it's a clock and it's ticking and you got but so much time. And when you hit 30, don't hit 35 because then you're sweating bullets and you may do drastic things. But whatever the case may be, I was fortunate enough to be blessed and I got married, but I had children quickly because that biological clock meant something to me because after 35, every doctor, everything you read said that your time was up and you were going into high-risk pregnancy.
Talk to us about what are the common causes of infertility?
Well, infertility is an unusual diagnosis in the sense that we're not talking about a diagnosis in a single person. We're looking at a couple, right?
Okay, yes.
So there are two people involved when we're trying to assess whether or not someone can become pregnant. So there are lots of causes. There are causes in the woman and there are causes in the man. And it really depends on quite a few things what we end up evaluating. However, there are lots of different causes. But it's important to figure out that how we define fertility before we jump the ahead.
So let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Let's define fertility for us.
So in defining fertility, for someone who's 35 and younger, we really say that they should be trying. And what does trying mean?
Yeah, what's the time frame on trying?
Trying means having intercourse without protection on a regular basis. Well, what's regular? 2 to 3 times a week. Right? 2 to 3 times a week. Right. And for people who are not having intercourse that frequently,
you may not get pregnant.
Exactly, you may not get pregnant, or if you're unable to, right? I have couples who are living in different parts of the country. You definitely need to be finding each other around the middle of your cycle, and by that I mean the middle of the menstrual cycle.
Exactly. Right? So, you wanted to say something, Denise?
No, I just find that interesting. Especially the concept today of people living apart. So that's another challenge, I'm sure.
Even for people living together, sometimes having sex 2 to 3 times a week can be challenging. In our busy lives, it can be.
Definitely. But moving on, in terms of the causes, though, you're talking about it's pretty much individual. So let me move on to the issue around treatment. What can you do if you find that you are in fact infertile? What kinds of treatments are available to women that want to get pregnant? But it's a female issue, not related to the spouse or partner.
So going back to what it means to try, sometimes this treatment can be simply figuring out when is the time to have intercourse.
So those little predictor tests, the ovulation predictor
tests,
tests, do those work?
They can work very well, but I don't even think that you need something that expensive. For most women, if you figure out that you're having a regular cycle, that's a good first place to start. And finding the midpoint of that cycle, or 14 days from the end of an average cycle, and figuring out that that's the middle of my cycle, that's when I'll be ovulating. For people who don't like to do the big counting, there are lots of other ways to predict fertility with vaginal discharge, temperature. There are lots of different things to do. And there are lots of different resources now for women to have that information and utilize it. So sometimes treatment isn't treatment, it's just figuring out timing.
Now, Leslie, you have gone through some of these processes. Would you like to share your experience with us?
Sure. Well, I've been married almost 7 years. Got married at age 40. So I met the right guy. It just so happened it was after 35 years old. We were married for about 2 months. Then we were pregnant and suffered a miscarriage about 10 weeks later. About 7 months later, I had 46 fibroids removed from my uterus.
You said 46?
Yes, 46.
Oh, wow.
Which is also problematic. Then the following year, we waited another year and tried in vitro fertilization, 2 rounds. The first round.
Now, just for our viewers who may not know, in vitro fertilization, what is that?
Do you want to?
Okay, just.
Yeah, so in vitro fertilization is when we're actually taking the egg and the sperm and uniting them.
And your sperm in your case, right? Okay.
And uniting them outside of the body. Then replacing them once an embryo is actually formed successfully, placing that into the uterus to develop and grow further.
Now, is it usually one that's placed or multiple?
I had a lot of drugs.
Okay.
And the first round, we had about 14 eggs. And
All implanted at the same time?
it eventually got down to 7 eggs that were implanted, and it did not work. We waited another month, did it again, and it went from about 15, 16 eggs down to about 6. And we implanted those 6, and there was a pregnancy. But then we lost that pregnancy as well.
Now, the drugs, how did it, I've seen people gain a lot of weight when they were going through this process. Is that something that you experienced? What did you experience during that?
I did not experience weight gain. I do remember taking large amounts of drugs. The worst experience for me was taking Clomid, and I recall one day I literally wanted to find a brick wall and bang my head into it. Oh, wow. It was that much pressure, but again, it was just heavy, heavy drugs for me.
Mood swings and...
Some mood swings, but I did not have the weight gain. I also remember as we got very close to when the doctor was going to remove the eggs, my ovaries were so full, I could hardly walk. And I just couldn't wait until the eggs were finally released.
So on one hand, I'm talking about timing, and then, Leslie talks, and we're talking about the other end of the spectrum, right? The other end of the spectrum where people are using treatments that involve assistance with medication, assistance with retrieving eggs, and sometimes if there are male factor issues, we're actually directly injecting sperm into the egg. So there's there's a huge spectrum of what we describe as infertility or decreased fertility.
Right.
I'd like to take a step back. At what point is someone deemed to be infertile? I mean, how long for years of trying?
Yeah, we use that diagnosis or that description very sparingly, right? So when we talk about infertility, we're really talking about subfertility. And again, for a year of trying, subfertility. So for a year of trying for a 35-year-old woman and her partner, right? A year of trying and they haven't conceived at all, that's subfertility, right? And we use it sometimes interchangeably, subfertility and infertility. For a woman 35 and older, we say if you're trying for 6 months, we'd like you to come in. And that's because with each month, the fecundity or the possibility of getting pregnant with each month is about 25%. And that's for the first 3 months. After 3 months, we see that fecundity rate go down to about 11%. So within a year, most people, 80 to 90% of people would be pregnant in a year.
Right.
But even within 6 months, we expect a large portion of people, over 50% of people, should be pregnant in the first 6 months. So again, if someone's 35 and younger or older, we'd like them to come in earlier because the things we can do to help are more effective in younger women.
Well, do you think, doctor, that it has something to do with the fact that women today are waiting longer and longer to deal with the issue of having a baby, whether it's financial security, finding the right partner, they may not want to be a single parent, but our bodies and our eggs and our health is only there for a certain point and period in time that we cannot at this point change or manipulate.
Fertility issues haven't changed over time. Our ability to help has changed. So
Sarah had a baby, what was she, 900?
Yeah, no, but a woman who was 40 in 1950, who didn't have a child, right? Who didn't have a partner, didn't consider herself infertile. She considered her, that was out of her realm of possibility, right? It was out of her realm of possibility. So the reason.
Before that, she was in old age.
And
Or
she was dead.
But so now that people know that we have treatments available, we're certainly having much more, many people who are considering fertility for themselves. Our lives are very different, right? That's right. I think that most of us look at someone who's in their 20s and having a child and go, wow, kind of early, right? But certainly if we're looking at fecundity rates, you know, it's not kind of early according to your eggs.
Right.
It's kind of early maybe according to your life. So it comes down to when is your life ready and when are your eggs ready,
Now,
right?
Leslie, in your case, you tried in vitro, but were there other things available to you besides the in vitro?
There was the, what is it, ITI?
Intrauterine insemination, so
Right.
IUI was
IUI, thank you.
available.
That didn't work.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
So again, I think we're talking, what I find with most of my patients, I just found the person I love.
You'll be happy to know that Leslie Jones Sessler did have a beautiful baby boy named Samuel. He's much older now, but she was successful. In this next episode, we'll speak to two people who chose surrogacy when the traditional route of pregnancy just wasn't an option for them.
Incredible experience ever. So, you know, I turned 40 a couple of years ago, divorced, single, and I said to myself, I've conquered everything I've wanted in life, but there's one thing I want, and that's a child. And then I started thinking, and Toni, you know me a long time, as you said, and you know when I want something, I go out
get
and
it.
I go get it. Doesn't matter how I get it, but I get it. And I looked at adoption, which is a wonderful thing, but it just didn't work for me. And then I met with a couple of agencies and decided that surrogacy was the path. And I learned all about gestational surrogacy and what it means. And I will tell you, it is the most incredible experience I've ever been through in my life.
Now, did you have, talk to us about your birth story, because in that it's not a spouse and a partner.
Yeah.
How did you get that experience?
So I literally found an agency. They're called CSED. They're in Massachusetts. Then found an incredible doctor in Connecticut, RMA Associates of Connecticut. He was amazing. And then found within a couple of weeks, I was very lucky, signed up with an agency. Within a couple of weeks, the guys at the agency called and said, we have a perfect carrier for you. This is her third surrogacy. She's in a wonderful marriage. She has 3 children of her own. No drama. Although you don't want to be hearing from a pregnant lady at 2 a.m. like, come to Pennsylvania and help me. So we met, we clicked, and I was very fortunate. She got pregnant on the first time. So it was me and an egg donor, and of course the carrier.
Now, you selected the egg donor?
So I selected the egg donor from a whole bunch of criteria, college educated, soccer coach, activist. You know me, Toni.
Yeah, right. She better be together.
But you've met my daughter, so now I'm all Italian, but I didn't want an all Italian child, so she's part Argentinian, the donor, part Argentinian, part African American, and part Irish.
Wow.
So she's got these, and Sicilian.
Yes.
So now you've got a Sicilian, Argentinian, African American, Irish girl from Brooklyn.
Right.
And she's beautiful, and it was an incredible experience. The carrier was great. I was very fortunate. It all happened at once. Now, as a single guy, you could imagine, they had no boxes for me at agencies.
Is it more than, it's a lot to bite off.
Lots to bite off. Yeah. You need the best nanny in the world, which I have, and you've met her, Jazz.
Yes.
My former boss, Marty Markowitz, always said you need a Caribbean woman in your life. So I got a Jamaican nanny. And I don't know who runs whose life, but I think she wins. But you have to be organized. You have to have things prepared. You have to have a village, right? It really, I hate to be funny about it, but it does take a village to raise a
Right.
child.
No, it's not cliche at all.
It's
It
not
does.
cliche, and there's a
Right.
lot of wonderful people in my life, including my mom, who's around a lot. So it's been, I will say, if you want a child and you can afford it, because it is very expensive. Unfortunately, in New York, it's illegal to do surrogacy. And one of my causes in the new legislative season, and I'm going to enlist you when we're up in Albany together,
Absolutely,
is to
I'm with
let
you.
government know, why should we be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars in Connecticut and Pennsylvania and Massachusetts when, putting aside the emotional part of this, it is a business. And there are people making money off of this. And why shouldn't that money be coming to women and people in New York City? So that's, I think, the toughest part of this is the agency I used was in Massachusetts, the doctor I used was in Connecticut, and the carrier and the birth was in Pennsylvania. So my daughter was born in Pennsylvania. It was an emotional
And you were there
experience.
to
I
be
was
for the
there.
birth,
I
right?
was there with my mom and two friends of mine, and the carrier and her husband and her children. And she is a sainted woman. I will always keep her in my heart. And we were there to witness the birth of my child, and it was wonderful. And then a day and a half later, you take her home, and it's incredible, incredible journey.
Wow. Now, Jen, you also used no, yours was not gestational.
It
Yours,
was
gestational.
gestational.
Talk to us about your journey.
So similar to Carlos, I feel that this whole experience of becoming a parent through surrogacy, even though, like you say, it takes a village, you never expect your village to contain egg donors and surrogates and doctors and lawyers and all these people you don't expect.
Lots of lawyers.
Lots of lawyers,
lots of lawyers.
accountants, just you don't expect that to have a
An
child.
accountant? Oh, because of the cost
Because
of
of the
everything
funds
and
and
everything,
monitoring
right.
your monies. You don't expect that. And I know for myself, becoming a parent, that's never the first direction that I thought I would have to take to get there. But after going through it, and it's so many ducks to put in a row, there's so many components to surrogacy to line everything up so that it can be, as much as an easy and smooth process as it can be. My journey was very different. Started with a cancer diagnosis when I was 26 years old.
And it was ovarian, right?
It was ovarian cancer.
Yeah, well, God bless you.
That's right.
Thank you.
God bless you.
Thank
Yeah.
you. I'm very fortunate. It was caught early enough.
Yes.
But it did affect both of my ovaries. So at the age of 26, I knew that I was infertile. I knew it intellectually. I didn't really know it on an emotional level for some time. I was so focused on being well, getting through treatment, getting through surgery, that it took me some time to come back to the idea of building a family. First of all, I think just dealing with a cancer diagnosis, your vision becomes shorter term. So even to think of a longer range plan, like becoming a parent that you hope to be around for, took some time to feel safe enough and comfortable enough making that plan. So once my husband and I, who was then my boyfriend at the time of diagnosis, and we progressed through the stages and got married, and then finally felt well enough to say, I'm feeling good. I'm fortunate enough to be here. Why shouldn't I become a parent?
Yes.
And what are my options now? So we started to do the comparison of adoption versus surrogacy because those were our two options. And also, like Carlos, some exploration and meeting with different agencies and learning more about surrogacy. We realized that it was really a wonderful process.
So it was gestational. So did you use your egg or was it your husband's sperm?
My husband's sperm plus egg donor into surrogate equals baby.
Right, right, absolutely.
Yeah,
Okay,
so for us,
okay.
I think a big push for surrogacy was maintaining the genetic connection to my husband. I felt like, I was at a loss of losing my ability to do so. So why should he lose that ability as well? So it was really nice to know that there was still that genetic piece. I think also in the comparison of adoption versus surrogacy, for me, with surrogacy, you really get to be engaged from the get-go.
Now, some of these stories have really happy endings. Hope all of this helps. See you next time on Brooklyn Savvy.